Hey, party people. Good evening, everybody. Our guest of the evening is going to be here in a minute. A little bit of a somber evening tonight. So I'm going to begin with that real quick. Actually, she's backstage now. But I want to start off with a tribute before we bring on Susanne. I want to start off with a tribute. I had as some of you may or may not know, some of you may have heard me say on Calling All Beings, I am super duper close with my high school classmates. And we have biannual reunions, get-togethers, if you will. And even my college teammates. Hey, how you doing, Ariane? Even my college teammates and I at Dean College in Massachusetts, where I'll be October 25th and 26th, we have an annual reunion. I got word last night after speaking with Susanne about tonight's episode that my friend from high school, Seth, was dead. Seth Gold is his name. He, real quickly, Seth graduated and went Ivy League, and he went to Cornell. Hello, Debbie. Good evening. Seth went to Cornell. I don't know what he got his undergraduate degree in. I know that he was in a very successful band while at Cornell. And then he went to law school there, graduated law school, and went into practice out in Los Angeles. Hey, good evening, Bubba and Saucy. And good evening, Jessica. Thank you, love. And so I found this out. Underclassmen of ours messaged me on Facebook, and then I spoke with Seth's sister today, and the maid found him unresponsive in his Los Angeles apartment. I think part of it, this is due to heartbreak, frankly. So it's a tough night for me, but I want to say one love for my brother from all the way back in elementary school, a wonderful musician, a wonderful, kind human being who would have loved last week's episode where we talked rock and roll, because he is absolutely a rock historian, and he was a great lawyer who once represented the Rolling Stones. So I love you, Seth Gold. I'll never forget you. And with that, but it's not going to be the raucous DJ intro that y'all are used to. So with that, I'm going to bring on our special guest for the evening. She's somebody whom I admire for her absolute tenacity in pursuit of justice, along with her colleagues, but certainly she has spent many, many hours on her own researching every angle of the folks that we assume surround the Sandra Birchmore tragedy and murder, of which someone has just been arrested, former officer Matt Farwell. So yeah, I admire the way this woman gets after it, and she does so for no money on her own time, and just because she hates injustice. And she also thinks about Karen Reed, and she also thinks about Enrique Delgado Garcia, but she's very, very focused on Miss Sandra Birchmore, whom we hope is, like I said, sharing a conversation in heaven with both Enrique and John O'Keefe. So without further, let us bring on our homegirl, the one and only Miss Susanne Cleveland.
Good evening, DJ. Listen, I know I appreciate you trying to stay in good spirits, but I am so sorry for your loss.
Thank you, love.
So sorry for your loss. We are adding way too many good people to the old meeting room in the sky, I feel right now.
Yeah.
And seemingly not a big fan of Billy Joel, but I'll say only the good ones. It seems
the good die young, right?
It's not okay. And you're right. I do detest injustice. And here we are trying to work on that. And maybe your friend and maybe anyone else who can't be with us right now appreciates that we're trying our level best to bring some justice.
Can I tell you a quick anecdote about Seth real quick? For his 50th, it wasn't the Whiskey A Go-Go, but for Seth's 50th birthday, he rented out a rock club on the Sunset Strip, which was like the Whiskey A Go Go, rented out the entire club, bought out the bar for the evening, brought in caterers, and just had all his friends and family. But that wasn't enough for Seth, so he got his college band from from Cornell. He had his band come out. They all did rehearsal gigs at his. He rented some facility, and then they played 3 sets the night of his 50th birthday. Now that is gangster.
That is gangster.
That is gangster,
it's
man.
gangster. It's baller. It is everything. All the things. And thank you for sharing that story. We all do need a little bit of a lift in these difficult times. Also, I'm sorry. This is Gracie, the Justice Cat.
Hey, what's up, girlfriend?
Calling all beans. Calling all beans.
She is welcome on this show.
I hope so, because she's feeling very neglected right now.
Anytime, she's welcome.
And so, even though we represent all the good things here tonight, we're representing justice for Sandra Birchmore, and I'm honored and proud to do that. And I hope it does bring some healing to anyone else who's got questions and is searching for the unanswerable. But we can tackle some of it, We can tackle some of it with facts.
Yeah. And we will. I mean, that's what we're here. We're here. This will be a loosely guided discussion. I will only take hold of the steering wheel if it feels like Susanne is headed for a ditch, and I got to be Susanne, wait. But no, we're going to let her drive the bus tonight. And by the way, so we have Miss Jessica B. NB, who is our quasi, there's something wrong with her wrench, but I don't know where Miss Jules is at night. So all love to Miss Julie out there. Jessica is our chat moderator this evening. And Jess, please let me know if you're going to be there Friday, because I need to do the promo like tonight after the show. So please let me know if you're going to be on Friday. Okay, love. All right. And as you see, she calls you Sassy Susanne, and ain't no doubt about that. So.
Oh, well, thank you, Miss Jessica. Definitely feel free to throw in any input that seems pertinent from the chat too. Any help we can get as we're working towards this cause of getting justice for Sandra Birchmore. And I'm sure there will be some input in the chat that I won't see unless you tag it. So any guidance is helpful. So yes. Where do we jump off, DJ?
So with that, with what you just said, folks in the chat, if you have a question for Susanne or you have a topic that you would like to bring up, please, if you would put it in all caps, that would be super helpful for us. We'd really appreciate that. And so, the most passionate thing that you've been discussing with me lately was what you had discovered about a certain, not the former coach at Notre Dame, Dan Devine, but the kind of icky former Stoughton police assistant chief or lieutenant or whatever the hell he was, Robert Devine. So there were some things about that on background that you have discovered that he was doing aside from what he had done to Sandra. So we could start there, or we could start with really who you think is tangential in abusing this young woman that people should be aware of and that you think could be implicated in some way. So, but I want you to go where you're most comfortable, ma'am.
Well, if I may, as it does pertain to this movement, Injustice for Sandra Birchmore, I'd like to start with a little bit of a PSA. I know it's bad form to read on screen,
please,
but I'd like to reconnect with the definition of grooming.
Okay.
And when I say reconnect with the definition of grooming, this is the language that is recognized by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and is embedded in the civil lawsuit by Sandra Birchmore's estate, and it is in there. So that's what I'm deferring to, just to remind us how this situation came to be. Grooming. According to the American Bar Association's understanding of grooming and abuse cases, grooming is a method used by offenders that involves building trust with a child and the adults around a child in an effort to gain access to time alone with her or him. In extreme cases, offenders may use threats and physical force to assault or abuse a child. More common, though, are subtle approaches designed to build relationships with families. The offender may assume a caring role, but befriends the child or even exploits the position of trust and authority to groom the child and or the child's family. The individuals intentionally build relationships with the adults around the child or seek out a child who is less supervised by the adults in his or her life. This increases the likelihood that offenders time with the child is welcomed and encouraged. It's an important point to revisit how grooming works. And I hope, even though it's a lofty definition, that it resonates with many that the method is to increase the likelihood that offenders have more time with the child and that it is welcomed and encouraged. And that's a good segue into talking about our friend Robert Devine. I'm not sure where we want to start with that discussion.
I mean, like you could start, Susanne, perhaps with how you surmise that the situation came to be that he was able to facilitate the guys that we know that actually slept with this young lady, of which he may have been one of them, but there were some underlings that ended up becoming prominent in this case, one of which has been arrested.
Which is a hotly disputed issue, is this history with the hiring, I guess with the raising of and being instrumental in the involvement of the Farwell brothers. We can't cover the entirety of Robert Devine's career because it started in 1999. It spans a couple of decades, but we'll say that it was definitely a meteoric rise to where he got as deputy chief and where he fell. And I'm going to use a slight visual aid because one of the things that is pivotal in the internal investigation of all three, but namely Robert Devine, is that he states that his onset into the Explorers began in 2003. Whereas there is a couple of timestamps along the way that suggest that that's not true, including this 2002 picture with Robert Devine in an Explorer meeting. I know it's not good quality.
Yeah, I can't see it. Yeah.
The viewers can see it. So essentially, I'll break it down. 2002 Explorers meeting where they do a demonstration for the public. At the time, Robert Devine was the SRO, school resource officer. And in the picture, Robert Devine is in a car with his hands out the window with Matthew Farwell with a rubber gun in his face, demonstrating an apprehension. Photos and proof and history don't lie in that regard. Why there was a distance in the fact of this interaction is still being explored, for lack of a better term. Either way, it is argued by both of the Farwells that they started their stint with the Stoughton Police in 1998 while they were adolescents in the program. And that segued into being in Robert Devine's, they describe it as him being involved and consulting and helping with the Explorer program because that's all been sort of downplayed. We know it's bigger than that because we wouldn't be here if it weren't bigger than that.
Right.
So
it wouldn't have resulted in a death.
Right. So that being said, I mean, there were other things along the way that point towards Devine's heavy involvement in these initiatives and getting the community and the families involved, including, and you probably can't see this either, but this 2014 Facebook photo with Sandra Birchmore.
Yes, I can see that one clearly.
So this is 2014.
10
So
years ago.
that's a long time. And as I sort of re-examine the internal investigation and look at sort of cue words or things that say, well, I mean, I knew of her. I knew she was in the program. This indicates to me a little more than that.
Yeah.
And, you know, going back and sorry to jump around time wise, but in 2012, when it became important to tout the new staffing of Stoughton Police and the sort of the heroes that they were taking on and bringing into the department, Devine is sort of touting and bragging about the Farwells in a 2012 article where he's being awarded with his bringing an amazing team onto the Stoughton Police Department. He says that the twins, quote, Devine's words, grew up before his eyes as he's being allotted for his hiring practices. All of them were involved in the Explorers program. Now, this is him speaking in an effort to say we're doing great things in the Stoughton Police Department, and part of that is me bringing in the twins that grew up right before my eyes.
Well, I mean, who wouldn't want to hire a couple twins who pulled people over with probably like a blue light taped to the grill of their car, pretending they're impersonating police officers? I mean, those would be like the first people I would want to hire. You know,
well, I mean, according to the reports, Devine was involved in counseling them.
Yeah, he spanked them. He pulled their pants down, and he put them over a picnic table, and he spanked their behind. So don't do that again, Matthew and William.
I'm not sure about that, DJ. I would say that falls in the category of allegedly. But certainly the thing that we can prove is what's documented, which is they grew up right before my eyes. And, you know, records would certainly demonstrate that he played an instrumental role in their development into who they are today. Which is,
so you think he groomed them?
If we're going by the definition of grooming, I would say that that's an accurate statement. As far as how that actually speaks to the law and what happens, that's up to the experts. That's up to, I guess now the FBI. Certainly the Post Commission has clearly been very involved in deciding how this pertains to anybody's moving forward in law enforcement, because that case is still pending, as we know, with the Post Commission. And so is the authenticity of Marty Riggs as the communication medium, which, by the way, originated as part of a Robert Devine initiative to involve the Stoughton Police more heavily in social media campaigns and bring the media and bring social media in a fun way, in a way to engage everybody 24/7.
And that was his Facebook profiles, that he first communicated with Sandra using that profile or befriended her.
That is what the internal investigation arrived at. Yes. Again, that's still being disputed in the eyes of the law by Devine himself. But if we're to go by the internal investigation by former Deputy Chief Brian Holmes, who was pretty definitive in that, he regarded any argument to the contrary as being untruthful and being part of the sustained finding of conduct unbecoming and Robert Devine not being credible. We'll certainly learn more about that as the cases continue to unfold. But Devine didn't have a very good history in terms of credibility. We talked before about the scandal in 2000. Should we go right into the scandal in 2015?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So going back, sorry, it originated, I guess we could say 2014 to 2014 is when it was outed or exacted that Divine was coming out of, I guess we could say, a messy affair. And this extramarital affair resulted in taking out harassment prevention orders on the ex-girlfriend. I'm keeping her name out of it for a lot of different reasons, but she's been through enough. It certainly documented who she is. But essentially, this harassment prevention order that was taken out was because Divine was decrying that the breakup became so messy that he became a victim of a harassment campaign. And what ensued from that, much to the baffling and chagrin of investigators as they went through a ringer of subpoenas and, I guess we could say, third party, I don't know all the terminology yet, but third party social media preservation orders is all of the fallout from this prevention order and all of Divine's claims that his ex was stalking him by social media ended up pointing back to him. That's
crazy.
The internal investigation, as it went along, as it chugged along, they had this harassment prevention order, and he continued to say, this is still going on. She's hacked my accounts. And among the third party social media preservation orders, I'm just going to list a couple because there's like 12: Twitter, Comcast, Pinterest, and a couple of temporary spoof accounts that were called Pinger and Bandwidth. And some of the results from the third party subpoenas were statements from, I guess, vendors or third parties, whatever. It said some of these accounts were set up for a day, and they were set up by VPN addresses that were public, and that were sort of, ghosting, moving around.
Mm-hmm.
And in the meantime, as this was chugging along, and Divine kept saying, and then I got another phone call, and then there's a new phone number, and was sort of moving the target. They started kind of calling bullshit on this story. That's not a legal term, but they were calling bullshit on it because I don't have 19 pages to read in front of me right now. So he kept up leveling, had her arrested, had her tech seized. And in the meantime, while she was facing jail time, he hit her up and said, you know what? I'm sorry about all this. I'm going to remove the harassment prevention order. I really want to see you. I know you're really down about the breakup. And she took the bait and got together with him. That was part of the investigation. And when they called him on it and said, again, not legal term, dude, what are you doing? You have an HPO out on this woman. Why are you meeting her at, I don't know if it was Chateau Restaurant or the Vanderbilt. There's a couple of them tagged in this report. He said that she was distraught and suicidal over the breakup and that he had to console her. He continued on to say, as the pioneer of introducing social media into the Stoughton Police Department, that he had been hacked and bamboozled by this woman. And at the end of it, they determined that there was a lack of candor to his claims. And in spite of this lengthy investigation that tied up, I'm sorry, I lost count of the departments. We had the Stoughton Department, we had the Easton Police Department, the Mass State Police, the DA's office, all involved in apprehending this treacherous woman who was bamboozling and victimizing Robert Divine. They concluded that it was untruthful. And he ended up on leave while they continued this investigation. And subsequently, he and his wife dropped the harassment prevention order just in time for the former girlfriend to not go to jail for a very long time. Everybody made a very public speech about how this was a good outcome. We just want to get back to our lives. It was a private matter. Everybody go back to your lives. Nothing to see here. We're okay. Except that the community was a little bit skeptical about, that was a really weird story. Are you sure it's okay? And so they were doubtful, and the town basically said, don't worry about it. We gave him 60 days without pay, and he's going to return down. I don't know how many pegs because I don't really know the pecking order from deputy chief to patrolman, but I'm going to say a lot. I'm going to say a lot of pegs. Also, as I just learned in the past couple of days, it made the distinction between him being non-union, which was deputy chief, and union as a patrol officer. Not sure where that comes into play in terms of the legal logistics, because it's really all complicated as shit. All I know is that it's been an important distinction whether you're in the union or in the non-union position. And where that comes into play, I guess we'll continue to find out. I do want to say that at the end of this investigation, the investigator, and I'm talking about the internal who had to sign off on, what are we doing with this guy? This case had a bunch of holes in it. All these agencies were tied up. And in his sort of final notes that he handed off to the police department, he described Divine as being untruthful, but it turns out that town management wants to keep him on, so we're not going to sustain, the misconduct. We'll give him it's not stay of execution, but we'll let him continue to work. But it was with a condition. First, the investigator stated that his behavior was an expository example of exploitative, misogynistic, and risk-seeking behavior that supersedes his professional responsibilities. He is not a credible person. Whereas he entered into an agreement as part of his demotion, the terms that he acknowledged and understood were that, quote, any future instances of him misusing his position or engaging in conduct and unbecoming a police officer or any other misconduct may result in more serious disciplinary action being taken against him, including termination from employment.
And that was all based on just their uncovering what he had done relative to spoofing the girlfriend and then blaming her and getting a restraining order on her.
I do want, and I'm sorry to have to correct on that, but harassment prevention order is different from a restraining order.
Okay.
And I've heard it stated both ways a number of times, but the paperwork doesn't lie. A harassment prevention order is the distinction between criminal and civil. A restraining order would have made more sense. You're in a messy breakup. You don't want to be in contact anymore. And it is a civil matter, so that it allows, again, it's not legal terminology, but it allows breathing room for those who are heated and struggling with behaving themselves. It allows an opportunity to sort of recover and move forward without ending up in jail. Now, if you break it, it becomes a criminal matter, whereas a harassment prevention order is already criminal. So an investigation ensues, and in that time, any contact becomes arrestable just on its own, even if it originated by the protected person. So meaning that, Divines reach out to say, don't worry about that. I'm going to drop that whole thing. I miss you. I want to see you. That was, is entrapment the right word? It's baiting.
Yeah. If there was the HPA that you say, then yeah, it was entrapment. That would be akin to entrapment, right?
Especially for somebody who is a law enforcement officer who is wielding the power of four separate agencies at the time to apprehend what for most people would be an ugly breakup with some pictures being disseminated and some, text messages. Not that I want to downplay that. It's not a downplay of the severity of engaging in exploitative behavior and disseminating things that are hurtful to families and upsetting to the viewers. Only if the person who did it is actually the victim, which is a really, it's been several years I haven't been able to wrap my head around the whole process. that Divine actually continued to push during that chapter. It continues to be baffling to the law enforcement agencies that were involved in that case. Or I shouldn't say continues, I don't speak for them, but they certainly left the internal report on a note of, what do you want to do here? He's full of shit, but the town wants to keep him. I don't know why. And that's, a decision had to be made. And the decision that was made was, we're going to take him down a few notches, but keep him on. The reasoning, it continues to beg reasoning.
I try to boil things down to their root cause, try to figure out, in the essence of looking at not only this case but the three cases, how did we get here? And you have heard me talk about this, and probably people that are watching Cab right now have heard me talk about this. But I feel as though there is some sort of an expectation that when one has gone off to a law enforcement academy in anticipation, and by the way, I've taken those tests before. I've been recruited before by a law enforcement academy after taking a test that they wanted me to come to school. I decided not to do it. Maybe I regret that, but because I would have wanted to make a difference. But and that was after my military career, by the way, after I retired. So I was 44 years old or so. Anyway, the point is that I think these boys have an expectation that if they go to law enforcement and become a law enforcement officer, or in Britain, get your warrant card, what they call them, where you can actually arrest people, there's an expectation that they can break the law. And there's an expectation that they can break the law. Whereas we look at it as, we know law enforcement officers, and they set an example for us on how to behave in society and how to follow the law. In fact, there's a Canton police officer that Peter Murphy, our friend, will tell you, has said, when I would be in an establishment and I would see Brian Albert walk in, I would pay my check and leave. And if I walked into an establishment and Brian Albert was there, I would turn around and walk out. So to me, that sounds like a law-abiding citizen who's not a civilian, because you're a citizen whether or not you have certain inalienable rights, whether you're a citizen or you're a law enforcement officer or you're military, you're still a citizen, And these sound like that kind of guy, and like the Peter Murphy type of a guy. Sounds like someone who has every intention of following the law and serving as an example. And Divine and Farwell and what's that other schmuck, the animal control officer?
Josh Heel.
And Fanning and Proctor and Buchanan and Brian Albert and Kevin Albert. And,
let's not forget Dunn. Sorry, we got to add.
And Dunn.
Dunn.
Right. And these schmucks seem like they have an expectation that they are going to break the law. They're not the rule, these guys, I don't believe. Not in Massachusetts nor in any of the 50 states. They're the exception, but they've become omnipresent because of the prolific cases that have ended in now 3 deaths. Actually, 4, when you count Sandra's baby, that are confined to probably a 20-mile radius, and all being facilitated, not only committed by law enforcement officers, but facilitated by other law enforcement officers with no intention that they enforce the law on other law enforcement. You are exempt. Hold on, Suzanne. I don't have a problem with a law enforcement officer pulling over another one who's speeding, going 75 and a 65 and letting, I have no problem with that, man. I don't. There's a famous case in like Pinellas County, Florida, where a Pinellas County sheriff pulled over like a black Miami police lieutenant and arrested him because he was going to give him a ticket. It's like, dude, you're going to give me a ticket? Are you serious right now? You're giving me a ticket. He threw the ticket at the guy. The guy arrested him. So that, I mean, I have no problem with that. A professional courtesy. No issue with that at all. But, you know, you're talking about serious crimes here. And people are just going, it's okay. Since this dude wears a badge too, it's okay. It's fucking okay, dude. We're going to cover for you. We got you, man. How does that happen? How?
Well, that more so, like you said, that we're not talking about a traffic infraction here. We're talking about somebody who is entrusted for, at least by the last public statements made, somebody who was entrusted for 12 years with working with the youth in town, in the town of Stoughton, in programs such as the Explorers and Oasis, which is another, you know, youth program involving organization against substance abuse in Stoughton, which, by the way, is in some ways partnered or at least supported very actively by Trooper Fanning. We can circle back to that another time. I'm just saying that there was a cooperative effort between the agencies, as much as it is not talked about in the most current investigation. Trooper Fanning is a Stoughton guy. Trooper Fanning was spending a lot of time back there with these youth initiatives, including Oasis. That is an undisputed fact. But as Divine was continued on this sort of, somebody said steady climb at some point. I think it was his chief that said steady climb. I would call it a meteoric rise, because he continued to move up the chain until his promotion, by the way, in I've got the article in front of me, May 2013, he was promoted from executive officer, which was a union position, to deputy chief, which is a non-union position, and had accolades up the wazoo from Chief Shasani. In fact, he was so excited to bring him into this newly created role of deputy chief, that there were, I don't know, I've got a whole stack of, you know, maybe 12 articles touting how amazing it was going to be, this new hire. You know, we took a day to assess all of the candidates, including Divine, and the chief said, just as I expected, it's excellent. He passes all of the vetting. He's the perfect candidate for this job. Such a perfect candidate.
Yeah, right.
That he sought legislative support to create this position so that he could basically hand over the reins of the department to Divine, so that he could go to, you know, to pursue FBI credentials and leave for 10 weeks. That was the beginning of where we are now.
Can you draw a thread between all the things that Fanning's been involved with in at least 2 of the 3 cases?
Not with relative ease. Not with relative ease.
Oh,
I mean,
right.
keeping in mind, I mean, if anybody's got anything that they can throw in the chat that supports that, I mean, it's not as though we haven't been trying to draw all of these conduits. There are plenty of connectors, but the reality is that there's so much cover up and moving of the shells and moving of the pieces that every time we think we've got the I hate to say smoking gun, but the smoking gun of Fanning being reckless with the, you know, supervising with the text messages and all that, we get an internal report that says, oh no, he wasn't involved in that. He was in North Carolina. His phone wasn't even working.
Yeah, right.
And not only was the phone not accessible during his vacation, to support that, I don't have it in front of me, but to support that, he said, not only was I with my own family and multiple children, I was with another family with 6 children. We were very busy. I wasn't reading my text messages. Why did you have to name so many kids in that argument? 1, 2, just because that's a little bit baffling. But the other part of it was in support of his not failing to supervise in that text message thread. He states he separates himself from being part of the same investigative unit as Proctor and Buchanan by saying, I'm not even a homicide guy. I'm a sex crime guy. What?
He sure is.
What?
He sure is.
And I mean, this is in a published internal investigative report. I don't 11 pages, 9 pages, that he says that without irony. I'm not even in their unit. I'm not a homicide guy. I'm a sex crime guy. Really?
As in committing sex crimes.
You
didn't catch that on my last go around.
The irony, that's okay. I left it hanging out there for the power of suggestion, but the irony in and of itself is that separating the investigative agency that you're so embedded with, and that you so aggressively moved forward to button up these cases, and I'm going to say cases because, as we know, Sanders was buttoned up and manipulated by Fanning to be nothing but a suicide, couldn't be anything else, and botched the investigative aspect of the sex crimes.
Or did he? Or did he botch it? Because that doesn't that indicate that it was an accident?
Which the death investigation or the sexual assault aspect of
any aspect of it. To me, an accident means I'm so inept that I looked at a crime scene and was unable to see the obvious elements of what occurred in that crime. And to me, what these guys are doing is not that. It's a willful disregard of it for cause. And the cause is to avoid implication of those whom they're trying to protect.
It sure points towards willful, doesn't it? I mean, how is everybody maintaining?
I bet my life on it. That's how sure I am.
Well, DJ, we don't want any more lives to be thrown under the bus in this crazy world that we live in right now. I mean, I think I probably bet my life on it too, hence the fact that I'm here, because I can't let this go. When you continue to look over and over again at the details, it is beyond comprehension. It's not sloppy investigating. It seems like a deliberate, ongoing cover-up. And not just one cover-up. We're talking, obviously it has been escalated to other investigative agencies, because guess what, guys? You didn't do your job here. Not only did you not do your job here in discovering the truth of justice for Sandra Birchmore from a local and the state level, but you made it worse. Like, for lack of a better way to put it, talk about fucking up a free lunch. It just seems on and on and on. Like, no, I mean, we're diligent investigators. We know what we're doing. Really? Because you've got civilians like me, whatever, would-be sleuths, accidental activists, whatever you want to call it, spending every waking moment trying to figure out the truth of the matter instead of the investigators. And that makes no sense to me. And not only does it make no sense to me, apparently the public is extremely disturbed, or we wouldn't be here right now, would we, DJ?
Well, I mean, how do you? I don't understand how you go from where you're investigating something and you're going, okay, I'd rather just pin this on the girl herself than saying I want to take someone who's dangerous off the street, when clearly that person exfilled the location with a hoodie and a mask on, and I know because he's from the town where I'm from, or he was a former cop there. And why wouldn't you want to get that guy off the street? Don't you think he would do it to somebody else, Fanning?
That is a really good question. And we now have, we had 3.5 years before, 3.5 years of an overall lack of safety with that individual and other individuals who were involved in dangerous behavior, plain and simple. 3.5 years of more danger.
Yeah, I mean, and how do you not want to see justice meted out upon this individual who you got to have a really good suspicion he's guilty? So I want to understand Fanning. I want to understand what the fuck he's thinking about.
Maybe we should have him
what is
on.
going through your mind? What's going through your mind? You know what happened here. So how do you come to the decision to go, you know what? We got to help this guy get off. How do you get there?
That's a really good question.
Unless you're a criminal. I mean, it makes you a criminal.
I mean, it's criminal. I think even from the beginning hours of the investigation reeked of criminality from the onset, because of how poorly the family was treated, how sloppy the investigative techniques. I mean,
are they sloppy? Because again, I'm going to go back. Sloppy indicates I don't know what I'm doing, and I think it's I want to make it look sloppy so that I can justify letting this person off, who, by the way, just happened to be on camera leaving her apartment and her phone never moved again. Now, that is just a coincidence. So, totally coincidental, right? So, anyway, read Jessica's thing right here.
Well, I mean, maybe
read Jessica's screen thing real quick.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Okay. Miss Jessica.
Well, Miss Jessica having a huge problem with who authorized EOD to be used with children. I don't know. I don't know the answer.
All right. Let me see if I can. So I have a huge problem with who the fuck authorized EOD bomb squad equipment to be used with children who do not have clearances, and William and EOD as team leader. Okay, so I think
talking about the program. Okay, the Explorers. Yeah. Yes. Okay, that's a good question. I'm sorry, Miss Jessica. I was having trouble translating that. We are still. I mean, if anyone in the chat or anybody in the team knows the answer to this, it has been an ongoing effort to try and figure out the chain of things being authorized via the Explorer program. And since Miss Jessica brings up a really apt point about the egregious use of the unauthorized equipment, I didn't know it was unauthorized, but here we are. There was at least one that I can speak to, and this is out of left field, but it was offered by someone in the support in the Justice for Sandra Birchmore group. And I was able to trace it back to Morrissey's office, which was that he authorized the use of, I'm not sure which school grounds it was, but he authorized an Alice training drill. If anybody's not familiar, it's the active shooter training program. And,
yes.
And from what I understand from the former explorer and supporter of Justice for Sandra Birchmore, and she did give me permission to describe anecdotally what happened, that Morrissey okayed this drill for Alice, and to this former explorer's point, she said there was one day where the cops in the Explorer program, and she didn't necessarily say that it was the Farwell brothers. She just said whoever was running the Explorers at that time called us and said, we have a drill to run with you guys. We need everybody on deck, and came to pick us up in squads and took us to a school in our, T-shirts, and the uniform that you saw, you can't see in this picture, but it's basically just, sort of a T-shirt and pants.
Probably cargo pants and whatever.
Cargo pants. Yeah. Threw us in squad cars and took us to this remote location and said, we're doing a drill, and gave us the rubber guns, the guns with the rubber bullets or whatever, and put us into this drill. And as students, as kids, as teenagers, their guns, the rubber guns were jammed, and the police, the ones running the Explorer program, the actual police who were in full gear, treated the kids as active shooters and rained rubber bullets down on them in their T-shirts. And they didn't know that their guns were jammed. That was part of the drill. rained rubber bullets on them. And at the end of it, while they're sitting there with welts all over them, gave them ice packs to put on their welts. And anybody who's ever done paintball, I hear, can leave a hell of a mark if you're not covered with protective gear.
Yes.
So gave them ice packs, and nobody spoke of it, and then brought them home and dropped them off. And that was the end of that. And she started this anecdote by saying, I wasn't abused in the program. I knew Sandra, but I had this weird incident that I just remembered. And I remember reading it and talking about it with someone else in the group, and saying, she started this anecdote by saying, I was never abused in the program. I knew Sandra and I feel bad about what happened, but there was this really weird day. And I thought, how is that not the definition of abuse? Is having these, terrified kids. I mean, I get that they were part of a program where they were cutting their teeth and learning how to be in law enforcement, but this was, nobody even had a sort of any way to prep for this Alice training. And, Morrissey just kind of gave the go ahead to say, yeah, round up some kids and go do this, whatever you want to do. And explorers, the ones who were administering the program in the departments, had carte blanche to do it any way that they wanted. And there isn't really a trace of it other than the article with Morrissey getting together with the cops, like in a, I don't know what kind of hall you call it, where they talk about great training that they're implementing, and then fade to scene, they say, okay, here's how we're going to do this, and go pick up the kids and have this drill. Unbeknownst to them, I get that's the point of surprise, but I would consider, and maybe I'm being a little bit of a snowflake on this, but being rained with rubber bullets and sent home with ice packs on your skinny little biceps, I would consider that to be abusive.
Well, let me say this. I'll speak to this from two different angles. One from a military perspective, and the other one from being a assistant coach at Gracie Baja headquarters for jiu-jitsu in California, where I worked with a lot of kids there. So from military perspective, I've never done training that involved like little kids, or whatever, even like teenagers, like what you're describing. And it seems the most douchey thing. And I want to use douchey because it appropriately describes these officers as very douchey guys. We're going to show these kids and we're going to toughen them up. And it's like, dude, it's not the police academy, man. Like, I cannot see doing that. I would not have done that. I might have taken them through some drills, but certainly not have shot them with the beanbag guns or the rubber bullet guns or anything like that that would hurt. I don't even know. I mean, if I was going to do it and there was some sort of paintball gun that was appropriate for this type of training for the age where it wouldn't, hurt that bad, but just hit them or something, maybe something like that. But there's no way I would be pelting these kids with rubber bullets that I would be using on adult police officers that are active and doing like you would do drills, like, doing house takedowns or whatever.
And in protective gear. They didn't have
any absolutely.
Gear,
absolutely. Yeah, you would. So, and from a perspective of a kids coach, so there would have been like a black belt, a brown belt, and I was a blue belt assistant coach underneath those two guys. And we would never have done anything like that with the kids that would hurt a kid like that in training them for competition and so forth, because some of them are a lot smaller, than us, or just a lot less skilled or a lot lighter weight to where you could really hammer them if you put your weight on them. So yeah, that's really stupid. And what I want to do right now, I want to hit up what these guys have in the chat, because I have a couple things. So let's hit up a couple of things here. So Mizzy was stitching back to what we said about fanning. And this gets back to the mindset of these hugely douchey kind of guys. but in this case, way more serious than douchey. You're talking about people who are committing, you know, in the office of the office that they hold, you're actually you're committing a crime there. I mean, a real internal affairs would crush an officer for doing what Fanning did. And she's saying they repeatedly looked in her family's eyes and lied
Mhm.
and told them your daughter killed herself. I mean,
Yep.
that is just, you know,
Your cousin,
the
your
height
niece.
of,
Yes, everybody
yeah,
loved her. They just repeated the mantra in the Friends. You know, forget about it. She was
yeah.
distraught.
She just
You know,
lost it. Yeah.
she lost her
She
mind.
couldn't
She
handle the
was
breakup.
couldn't handle these fine gentlemen not being a part of her life anymore.
Yeah, there's not a girl on earth who would want to kill herself over that loser. That girl doesn't exist that would kill herself over a douche, doofus like Farwell, or as Sean would call him, that big mofo.
The worst.
So Barbara so Barb says the feds could bring the other two in just for what they're doing and not doing while on the clock, like Matt Farwell did. So this is the big question, Barb, and this is for you, Mizzy, in the chat, and everybody else, and Suzanne. We don't know what they know that's criminal that they can prove. And the one question, if I could ask Mizzy and Suzanne a question right now, is what do you think they have in terms of phone calls between these players? So phone calls that Divine, who seems very, very slick operator. What do you think they have in terms of phone calls that would implicate between Divine and Matthew, Divine and Billy, between Fanning and Matthew, between any of these guys, either the perpetrators of the sexual abuse or the perpetrators of because those guys after the say they could have ditched those phones long before she was murdered, you know, and had totally new phones and not been in that type of communication. But I would love to know what anybody has in terms of the phone data between these what do we want to call them, co-conspirators that surround Sandra Birchmore's, not only her abuse but her murder.
I definitely want Mizzy or Barb's input on this, but my first thought is that they have the social media records of the Marty Riggs account. That doesn't necessarily involve a phone. That could be just messaging, and it could be, you know, what do you call it, FaceTime. I mean, if somebody connects to that and you go to great pains to delete the accounts, there's a trace to that. Now, they've been pursuing the Marty Riggs account for a long time, and this whole thing about the authentication of it still being in question, I'm going to call bullshit on that. I believe they have it all. The post commission process is just still being dragged out with this discovery. You know, Robert Devine's lawyer, Robert Stowe, has asked for an additional 2 months to cull through the discovery every 2 months for the last 8. That's a summary of sort of, you know, being on those hearings, but every 2 months he has said, I need another 2 months, because what is described by this terabyte of data is that it's 250 times 2-hour movies, and that's just a rough description of how much media there is. Now,
media meaning what? Explain that to the audience. What does that mean? 250 2-hour movies is what does that mean?
In terms of trying to describe the content of this terabyte of extraction from the devices,
How many?
Robert Stowe said, think of it as watching 2-hour movies times 250 in those increments in terms of the data, whether it be the emails or the video itself or instant messenger messages. It's all in this one convoluted file that he's having difficulty with. Well, gee,
And
I wonder why
Robert's
the extraction is difficult.
okay. So hey, let me ask some questions here. So Robert Stowe, I thought you said he was Divine's lawyer.
He's Divine's lawyer. Robert Stowe is the one who
So
makes the argument in front of the post commission about
so
the time.
he's telling how much data there is.
Well, it's just part of the discovery that there's this terabyte of data that all parties need to call through, including the post commission lawyer and the judge. I mean, it's part of the discovery.
Okay.
So, and it's certainly in the civil suit with Sandra Birchmore's estate. So this data that Divine is pushing back on as being any proof of him being Marty Riggs involves nobody really fully. I mean, I shouldn't say nobody. Some people know what a terabyte of data is, but in an effort to explain how much work he has ahead of him, Robert Divine's lawyer, Robert Stowe, said it's like watching 2-hour movies times 250. There's a lot of work to do here to break it down.
That doesn't sound great.
No. And when I hear that in this repeated ask for another 2 months to cull through this information, I think, well, I mean, too bad, so sad. You have to cull through this material, but your client is part of generating, or at least the pattern that created this data.
Well, the judge can deny it. So, I mean,
the time? No, the post commission judge certainly allowed more time to go through this discovery.
But they could. They don't have to, though.
I guess we'll find out what it was just basically, I know it was brought up conversationally amongst a couple of us that it's infuriating that the judge for the post commission, at least in this last discussion and maybe one or two before that, kind of treated it very much like an old boys club. Like, oh, that is a lot. Oh, I'm exhausted already. Let me get my.
It's like Beverly Cannoni, all of Beverly Cannoni too.
Yeah, it must be really hard. No, you know what's actually really fucking hard is being somebody who is abused and murdered. Like that's way harder.
That's really harder. Yeah, and the family dealing with it.
And the family being subject through this tort. I mean, the quintessential definition of the tort case is tortuous action. How much more tortuous does it get to have to cull through this information that points towards this grooming that involved anybody who had to do with these officers for an extended period of time? I mean, this is going back to the language of the civil suit, is, years and years of this treacherous behavior and abuse and this grooming behavior that is not. The reason why I brought that definition up again is because, first and foremost, justice for Sandra Birchmore and the hell that she went through and the way that her life ended. But this grooming expands to everyone involved. It expanded to the families. It expanded to the community. It expanded to friends. It expanded to kids who, to the point of this anecdote of this nice supporter in our group that, I wasn't really hurt, but there was this weird situation with being, rained on with rubber bullets and then being kind of sent home, scratching my head and with ice packs on myself. I mean, that's a big picture grooming, isn't it?
Well, that right there, I think, is really just douchiness. It seems like the grooming was more, the ones where there was some sexual innuendo connected to it. I think that's just douchiness and people that don't know how to maybe train kids and thought that they were going to, oh man, now my cat's in the picture. Here's Hera. All right, Hera.
Hera's another justice cat.
Yeah, she sure is. She's meting out the justice on me. So I want to ask Mizzy and the Hizzy. You say that they have it all. When you say they, who are you referring to? And Susanne, if you know the answer, since you're live, who's they, and then we'll go to Jessica.
She might know better.
Barbara.
You might know better than I do.
Who's they?
I mean, the FBI wouldn't have been able to apprehend Matthew Farwell unless they had a shit ton of information. So the FBI affidavit for Matthew Farwell's apprehension certainly supports that they have a boatload of information that is inculpatory, or they wouldn't have been able to arrest him.
We're talking about the FBI. Come to
Yeah.
praise his name.
And I mean,
Sorry.
I'm sure there's other
Well.
theys. I mean, keep in mind, there's several investigative agencies listed that have been part of the discussions within the civil lawsuit. I love the ears
Yeah.
that have been listed as part of the civil lawsuit, including, you know, the Attorney General's office and white collar crimes. Which, back to the point, I don't know if it was Barb or Mizzy that said in the chat that part of what is hanging these guys is that this data or this repeated behavior occurred while on the clock. This, you know, leaving the station and meeting
Yes.
up for the abusive behavior and I don't like to say quickies, but I don't know a better way to summarize it. But these 20-minute, these 20-minute,
we all understand that.
They're abusive. They're abusive
Yeah.
sessions. If it started when, you know, Sandra was still a kid, anything that happened subsequent to this grooming and abusive behavior, it falls under the same shroud. You can't start with lulling a young woman into the security of your protection and care as a law enforcement agent, have that escalate to sexual activity as a teen, and then say, oh, well, she was consensual at 20, 21, 22, and right up until the point where someone allegedly took her life, not her. You can't separate that out as consensual activity. It falls in the same category. So that any of that happened, or this salacious, exploitative terabyte of data happened while on the clock, is definitely of interest.
Well, they cited a federal statute. They cite a federal statute on that, right? Some sort of they cite a statute that has to do with like a dereliction of duty, sort of like being AWOL. And I'm paraphrasing here, but it's like being AWOL while charging hours.
In wire fraud, because of the payroll transactions, because as we know, the payroll transactions are go beyond, you know, the state. They, you know, they leave an account, come back.
The bank's not in the state, perhaps, or whatever.
Bank of America, you know, it's an exchange across state lines, so to speak, of the wired. And every time you accept a paycheck, you're committing fraud if you've engaged in unlawful activity while on the clock. So I'm going to guess, I mean, I can't really do the math on this any more than I can differentiate what a terabyte is. But I'm going to guess a shit ton of paychecks collected while engaging in misconduct.
I'm going to have to get rid of Hera now because she's starting to play with the equipment. And this is the part where she has to go. Hera, it's been great having you on the show, babe. Okay.
Well, Gracie already ate one of my affidavits because I was picking up the paper and reading off of it just to reorient to the dates. And because she's frustrated, she ate it. I can hear her chewing it in the other room. The cat ate my homework.
The cat. All right, let's get to some more of the stuff. What's in the chat here?
And Miss Jessica, yes, they are a douche.
They are so douche. These guys like think they're cool, and it's usually the guys that think they're really cool that are the douchiest. I just need more details on what exact robots were used, equipment, because of, in all seriousness, this could open up a whole other. Okay, so Miss Jessica, I'll tell you what she's talking about. So, Jess, I think what you're talking about is if we can find out what items were, let's say, borrowed from the reserves and brought over and used over in this police training, there could be illegality there if it was not, let's say, signed out properly and for the proper use and was being used in something other than United States Army training. I think that's what you're getting at,
mean
Jessica.
Like the suit? The suit is
no, she's talking about when she's saying robots. So if you're doing EOD training, they're robots that they use because some of the disassembly and collection of improvised explosive devices are done by robots so that people don't get killed. People like Jessica that would have been doing that. And if those robots were signed out by the Farwells and then taken over to the police and the Army was not aware, that those items were taken from the battalion or their brigade or whatever and brought over and used in Stoughton police training, there could be illegality there. So that's what she wants to know. So if anybody can find that information out, let's forward it to me or forward it directly to Jessica or to me, and I'll get it to Jessica. We're gonna go on with some other things here. So Barb, yeah, I don't think it's stupid. I think it's them being told jerks and they're bullies. Yeah, absolutely. It split the family up between those who believe the MSP and those who didn't. So that's really interesting, Barb. You're talking about the Birchmore family.
Fanning's manipulation.
Yeah.
Fanning and Dunn's manipulation in their lies. They're saying at the scene, don't pay any attention to the broken necklace and the chunk of hair in it. They were manipulated. They were gaslit, and they were in the calls were the calls from loved ones saying this can't be right. She didn't die that way. They were manipulated too.
Yes, absolutely.
And I mean, you look at the report, which is the MSP report, which is a sick joke, as we all know. Those calls that were from bereaved loved ones saying, we have a lot of things to say about why there's no possible way that she could have killed herself. They were oriented towards, well, what do you mean? I mean, she obviously had issues and she was obviously entertaining multiple men. They did this with loved ones.
Yeah.
Based on the information from the killer.
Yeah, they want to make the family think that their daughter was involved in salacious activity, so that it'll somehow say, oh, she was doing this, sleeping with too many men. I mean, she basically put herself in this situation. It's nice to be. Oh, he's. All right, let's see what else. The feds and probably the MSP. I copied that, Mizzy and the Hizzy. Also, the AG, Mr. Josh Levy, our hero du jour. If nothing else, the feds could bring, federal wire transfer fund and all their on the, possibly. The problem is, when you see what the feds charge, I would encourage everybody to look at what they charged Matt Farwell. Again, we've alluded to it here. None of us are, let's say, aware chapter and verse of every aspect of it. But I would encourage everybody to read those charges, because what you can glean from that will harken back to a movie that had Tom Cruise and Kevin Bacon in it, A Few Good Men. Mm-hmm. And you'll recall that Tom Cruise was sitting around his brownstone there in what's that section of DC, Suzanne?
I don't know the name.
Georgetown.
Yeah,
Georgetown. And Demi Moore was there, and I can't remember that actor who played Sam Weinberg was there. And he said, it's not about what we think. It's about what we can prove. And he screamed at them because they were trying to come up with scenarios. You can get him on this. You can get him on that. You can get him on that. And he's like, it doesn't matter what I think or what we know. It matters what we can prove. And so what Josh Levy did was we know, Barbara, certain things that happened. We know that these men had sex with her. We know they groomed her. We know that they put her in a situation that culminated in her death at the hands and victimized her. But Josh Levy didn't go with those things, right? None of them. He went with what he could prove. And you should read those charges. That will be a window into if he could go and arrest Billy Farwell and I told you Hera was going to come back. Once is not enough for her. If you start messing with the equipment, you're out of the studio. Do you understand, young lady? She's like, screw you. I'm running this joint. And she is. And it's true. She is. And everyone in the house knows that Hera's running it. So anyway, so that should be a window, because if they could have already gone and arrested Billy Farwell out there in Arizona or New Mexico, I guess he's in Arizona now, they would have. And if they could arrest Divine, they would have. So the fact that they can't tells you that maybe they need Matthew Farwell to try to cut a deal to implicate somebody else. If in fact, and even if he did, even if he said these guys were in on it, would that be enough, Suzanne? Yes or no? Just give me a one-word answer.
No.
It wouldn't be, because
I
they
mean,
would
how credible is a calculated murderer is for one.
Well, it's not credibility, right? It's
he'd have to hand over.
Yes, it's not about what we know. It's about what we can prove. And that's how we, as victim advocates, have to think about it, so we don't go hog wild that they're going to go, they're going to go get Jen McCabe tonight. They're going to go get. It's about whatever they have that can prove that people were involved in this, and we don't know what they have that proves that someone else conspired in any of these acts.
We do know that they're working on it.
We do know. Yes, we know.
We do know that they're working on it, and we know per Josh Levy's speech that his press release, he was definitely alluding to the fact that there were multiple investigations underway. He can't name them. He can't name and claim them. All he can do is say, yes, we're working on that. Yes, I can't say anymore because it's active.
Well, he said we have 1,000 cases in the office. So we just want to speak about this
Sandra
particular.
Birchmore.
Yes.
Yeah. Today we're talking about this for Sandra Birchmore. Yeah.
Yeah, because people want to go, oh, what does this mean for Karen Read? We don't know. We don't know what it means. We don't know that it means anything. We hope it means something. We hope it means that they are days away from arresting one of these co-conspirators in Sandra's abuse. But we just
God willing. Know. But he definitely did say. I mean, yes, I can't talk about all 1,000 cases, but even in answering the question specifically in Justice for Sandra Birchmore, he said multiple investigative angles in reference to her case.
Good.
I don't want to misquote it, but he named a few different areas that they were looking into. He didn't dismiss it and say we got the one bad guy. There's much more involved, but he also can't tip his can't show his cards either. I mean,
he can't show his cards.
That's the very frustrating part of that, is that when you say we can't go all hog wild, well, guess what? That's not really my strong suit. Is restraint and dialing all of this back.
No, I'm not saying we can't go. I'm not saying we can't go hog wild. Yeah, we can go as hog wild as we want. We have every right to do that. I'm just saying that if we want a window into how they're thinking about this case, we should look at the charges against Matt Farwell and use that as something of a template of what they might be looking to use if possible. Otherwise, if that were not the case, then they would have arrested all three. Potentially.
Yes, and Barb makes a great point right now where she just mentions it couldn't have just been Sandra.
Right.
Who's to say that of the 300 that Robert Divine himself espouses young lives that he has personally contributed to molding and shaping, who's to say that they aren't calling through those 300 lives to figure out, has anybody else been egregiously harmed in some way, or even has information to offer?
Let's speak about that for a second, because I think germane to this discussion is the type of culture that we're living in there in Massachusetts. And the culture does not suggest yet that somebody is going to come forward, because the whole thing is about cover up. The whole thing's about appearances, whether that be an individual saying, I don't want to bring my now 21-year-old or 23-year-old into the limelight and open up this wound that I've been paying for counseling for the last 6 years because this cop in Stoughton groped her during the Explorers program. And the culture does not suggest that that's going to happen, because if it was after this guy's arrest, guess what? It probably, not definitely, it probably would have already been happened, Barbara. So is there more victims? Almost certainly, they would have looked for that one girl who had just below the self-confidence line, just a delta just behind that self-confidence line where a girl goes no, shoves him off and says, I'll tell my dad or I'll tell my parents. That person, just below that cut line, they may not have found a lot of victims because they needed somebody like Sandra, somebody looking for authority, looking for a father figure. And that's what's so sickening about this grooming.
It is, because it's that sense of wanting to belong and wanting to be cared for, and the the trickery that they use, exploiting that is the ultimate betrayal. The saying, don't worry, fam, we've got her back, we're watching out for her, she's in good care, she's in good hands. We obviously know that not to be true.
If you got mom and dad there that are standing by, that are waiting for the daughter at the 20 minutes before the end of training, that are there, anything that the parents could attend, that the parents are there watching, they're not trying to exploit that daughter. They're trying to exploit the daughter where there's no parents there. They're trying to exploit the ones where there's no supervision, and they're like, there's a target. There's a target because this one doesn't have that sense of home life. And that's what makes
it doesn't even have to be that deep. It could just be somebody who hangs around longer because of the fact that, like Sandra, they had more energy and more try and more, give me another task to do. I really want to help you guys. I admire you. I look up to you. It doesn't have to run as deep as being, they thought of every angle. That's hence the magic of grooming.
Well, the example is, I'll give you an example. Like for me, when I was a senior year, I was a wrestler. My father refused to take me to wrestling practice or pick me up from wrestling practice. So I had to find my way over to a friend's house until he felt like coming to get me. So you have a kid now that's walking around, that's by himself, that's having to find a place to be because unlike the other kids, mom and dad was there either watching practice or there as at the end. So if there were a coach that would have been exploitative, that was looking for that target kid, they would have looked for a kid like me, where the parents weren't around.
Yeah, I was a latchkey kid. I just sucked at sports.
Yeah. But that's how they look for somebody like Sandra. When the parents are omnipresent and the father has that figure, presents that figure of somebody who's there, who's present, who's watching, who's a don't fuck with me kind of a dude. I don't care if you're a police officer or not. That's my baby girl. That ain't the girl they're looking for. They're looking for the girl where the parents ain't around. I know
that narrows it down.
That's a fact.
That narrows it down from 300 to, I don't know, question mark. How many of 300? It seems to defy logic that number would go from 300 to 1, just being Sandra Birchmore. So to that end, I mean, first and foremost,
there's more, probably.
First and foremost, top priority, justice for Sandra Birchmore. In light of that finding, in incurring justice for Sandra Birchmore, if it helps anybody else summon the will and the energy and the bravery to seek help and assistance and overcome their own victimization, I would call that a positive if we ever get there. I would like to believe that the FBI has some kind of hidden task force that we don't know about that is culling through the possibility of anyone else being hurt or exploited. That the accidental, passionate activist in me would really love to have assurance that that's happening. It certainly wasn't happening in the first couple of years. I don't find any evidence to the contrary that there was nothing being done in the first couple of years. But I have to believe that the onset of other investigative agencies and the onset of the FBI and the Attorney General's office has maybe said, hey, we better look way deeper into this because we don't even know what happened with the 300 to the one that we know that ended as ultimately and tragically as it did with Sandra Birchmore. And by the way, that they went so far as to try and blame her and frame her for her own death before anybody intervened and said, hey, hold up a sec. Did you miss the hyoid bone, the laundry in the washing machine, the absolutely absurd efforts that these men went to cover up their actions, the phone data being, messed with, their absurd level of interrogation that took place in a parking lot, in an elementary school parking lot to start with.
What a metaphor.
A metaphor or just a
symbolism
joke. It's a sick fucking joke. There's really no other way to put that. And the subsequent other joke of an interview was in a public place where anybody would drive by and be like, "What's up, fellas?" I mean, come on. That wasn't just Fanning, by the way. That was Fanning and Dunn, both both partnering for those absurd level conversations, as opposed to, again, I've said this before, it's not just a matter of the person not being a suspect. Okay, you got to circle the wagons on the suspect part, but how about person of interest? How about just somebody who might know a thing or two about the disturbances going on in Sandra Birchmore's life? If it really was a suicide, which it wasn't, that still warranted a higher level of attention.
If that would have been, so let me personalize this before we read Missy's tweet, and then we're going to sign off. If that would have been DJ that would have left her apartment in a hoodie and a mask, I would be in jail. I would have been in jail for the last 24 months. I would be, if any one of us, Susanne included, a woman, anybody who would have suspiciously tried to disguise themselves, left that apartment, and that phone never moved again, we would all be in jail. The only reason that this scumbag wasn't in jail was because he was a police officer. That's the worst thing. The second worst thing about this, other than that Sandra and her baby are no longer with us, is that if it were any one of us, any one of those family members of Sandra Birchmore, the ones that believed Fanning, they would have been in jail. If it would have been girl X, you would be in jail. And you would have been in jail since that happened. If they could see you looking up at that damn camera with the mask on and the hoodie, and then and that phone never moved, and then people came in and found her in that position and found the hyoid bone, and you were the last one in that apartment. Are you kidding me? And they have text messages that prove that you were there. Oh, you come in, when you're going to be here, all that shit. Come on. They protected a murderer. I mean, it's straight up, Fanning, you protected a fucking murderer. I hope you're proud of yourself. I hope
better be justice
that you are so excited, and I hope your family gives you a big hug and says what a great detective you are, because you protected a murderer. All right. Mizzy and the Hizzy, like Thin Lizzy, the D.O. double Drizzy.
I'll read that one. It's more than that, though. What we were just saying, it's more than that. There will be a superseding indictment. They took him into custody because the day before the judge in the civil trial said they would get discovery from the AG. Okay, that does check out. I did look through. I mean, I know it checks out because Mizzy knows what she's talking about. She's the OG, and she does know this case inside out, and so does Barb. I'm definitely learning as I go. And they were facing a lot of information dropping, and the AG. I was in on the hearings leading up to the discovery and the in-cam review, and it's to the untrained person, which is to say that that's what I am. It was real fireworks, the discussion going back and forth about the discovery, and the AG saying, listen, we got into this because nobody was really doing their job effectively. She didn't quite say it that way, the person representing the AG, but she said, were relatively new, and the judge pushed back and said, well, how active has it been and how new is it? Because there are so many protections in place for police officers involved in a situation like this. They have to err on the side of abundance of caution. It definitely boggles the mind to think that there has to be so much protection and caution and carefulness towards someone who murdered a 23-year-old pregnant woman. But here we are, watching that all unfold in real time.
That what I'm saying, home girl. I think we did the damn thing.
Well, it's not done yet. There's more to come.
I mean, for tonight. I mean.
For
yes.
tonight. Yeah.
I'm not going to broadcast until Billy Farwell gets arrested, but he will eventually get arrested.
That,
yeah. And what's his face?
Robert Devine.
Yeah.
Let's not let him off the hook. And let's not forget.
Lord, hear our prayer.
2002.
Yeah. The groomer. He's the groomer.
Yes.
Yeah. So what my homegirl has said here, our quasi wrench. We have 61 likes. There are 105 of you watching. If you would click the like button on our YouTube, that's all we would ask of you this evening. We would greatly appreciate if you would hit the like button. If you would care to subscribe to Calling All Beings, we would also appreciate that. We plan on bringing you plenty more content. We got lots of guests lined up to come on and talk at all three cases. I don't think we really got the traction with Coach Luttrell that we should have when you have a law enforcement officer, a guy who was an MMA fighter, a guy who coached. He taught, he retired from law enforcement. He taught police defensive tactics like Todd does or did. He was an MMA fighter. He was an MMA coach for a quarter of a century. And he came on the air and said that those injuries to Enrique Delgado Garcia were not consistent with boxing training associated with police defensive tactics. And I really think, he's the foremost expert he is the foremost expert that has come on a show to talk about Enrique Delgado's injuries, period. The foremost expert. Now, why do I say that? He has more hours either as not only as a police officer, he has the same hours as all our other friends that are in this space that are broadcasting, but he has more hours fighting, coaching fighting, and teaching police officers to fight than anybody. And he said, I've never seen injuries where there's a broken leg, knocked out teeth, and a broken neck associated with boxing that's been crafted as defensive tactics.
Can I say, well, I think this is a good place to end. It's raising a question, but it actually piggybacks off of what you just said about him being the foremost expert and saying that he never, in the past week or so, while we're all still, have whiplash from all of the craziness that is going on in all of these cases, I spoke with a law enforcement expert as well, who's a good friend of mine. And when he was saying that, I'm finding it hard to wrap my mind around the whole, Divine training these guys and being instrumental in bringing them on as law enforcement being explorers and watching them grow as kids and bringing them onto the police force. He said, I've dealt with a lot of, kids that I mentored and brought on, and they acted like fuck ups and idiots as kids. And I don't know that I would have necessarily thought, don't let them become cops or whatever. And this is just really sticking with me. That we couldn't possibly be responsible for anybody. He didn't say we can't be responsible. He just said, I would find it hard to believe that anybody that I dealt with for that many years would end up on the police force and end up in this situation. It boggles the mind how it could end up that way. And I said, well, let me ask you this, as you're trying to cull through your own history and doing some soul searching, and you realize that you had some kids who were punks and like fucked up when they were younger, and they still ended up being, you know, police officers. Did any of them kill anybody? And it was the first time that he just didn't have he said, you make a good point. No.
Yeah.
No. So to your point about your fine expert that you had on the other day, that I've never experienced this. Well, the guy that I was talking to was 45 years in the biz, so to speak. And he was basically saying, not in defense of, but just out of just sheer mystery of how anybody that he saw as being difficult as a teen and gave a chance in law enforcement would have stood out as somebody that he had to worry about. And so when I pushed back on that, which I clearly do, well, did any of them kill anybody? Well, no. He didn't have anywhere to go with that question. It basically gave him more questions about his career and how we end up here.
Well, they are among many, because if we look in society and we look at murder cases, I mean, we could just look at the young girl down there in the Carly. I'm trying to remember her name now. That just the 15-year-old or whatever that was just put in jail for killing her mom and then attempting to kill her stepfather.
Yeah.
And the point is that we don't know. We don't know who's going to become a killer, and this guy couldn't know. And if he thought he could know, then how? I mean, Aaron Hernandez. I mean, people just don't know. We don't know. We don't know who these people are going to be. The problem is that when we fucking find out, like those guys do, and then you still do nothing, that's what I got a problem. Obviously, I have a problem with. It's not. I don't. This guy is no more qualified to predict that these guys were going to murder somebody than we could name. If we sat down and did a Google search, we can name 100 cases like that from the Menendez brothers that are on Netflix now. Many cases, you don't know who's going to commit murder. The 3 girls in West Virginia, the 2 girls that killed the one girl out in the woods that I sent you the podcast the other night. You can't believe you're going to go out into the woods and stab a girl in the back. Your high school, for what? Like, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense.
But it does make sense that we continue to figure it out, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does, and it doesn't make sense that. Also, doesn't make sense that someone would know that this person did it and choose to draw attention away from them and point the blame at the victim. Now, I want to say something else, Mizzy, about this. When I say this about Coach Luttrell, this is not to say, oh, look at my show, it was great, and everybody should watch it. That's not what this is about. I don't give a shit if another 5 people watch the show. But Coach Luttrell is the foremost expert to discuss. And we're not only here talking about Sandra Birchmore. I can talk about any one of these cases. He's the foremost expert to talk about Enrique Delgado that's come out yet. And he should be on other people's shows so that people don't think that what the Mass State Police are telling you is true, because it's a lie. It was not a boxing accident in training. And Coach Luttrell has seen more training than anybody I know, and I covered MMA for like 13 years. So that's the point. It's not that he was on this show. I want him on with the Las Vegas Cops. I want him on Sean's show, and I want people to understand that those injuries were not consistent with what they're telling us. I don't care if they say, oh, he was the biggest guy, and he was a wrestler, and he was a boxer, and everybody was scared of him, and Enrique stood up to him, and then he got up off the floor, and he hit them with the death blow. I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it. And that's not what happened. So that was the purpose of me bringing that up, not to laud Calling All Beings or my show. It's to laud Coach Luttrell, and his experience is unparalleled right now, only specific to Enrique Delgado, not to Sandra Birchmore, not necessarily Karen Reed. We have brilliant law enforcement officers that are talking about this, from Gonzo and Brian and Sean and Peter and others. So even Javier Velasquez, who was on with Sean a couple weeks ago, he has some experience in Muay Thai and jiu-jitsu, and even he's not at the level of Coach Luttrell. So that was what that's about. And God willing, I got to hook him up with Brian and Gonzo. So with that, Susanne, please tell everybody where they can find you and what your next appearance is going to be, etc. And of course, all the stuff for you is going to be in the show notes, along with the Sandra Birchmore Facebook page, as it was last time.
Oh, and certainly anybody who is trying to get more information about this cause and about Sandra's life, justiceforsandrabirchmore.com. It's not everybody wants to be on Facebook. Some just want a depository of information so that they can play catch up. That's kind of how I ended up here.
Okay.
So hopefully you get more experts, and hopefully you find the ultimate expert in the Justice for Sandra Birchmore case, because I know a lot have weighed in, and can we say who the foremost is yet? It's unclear, because it's very difficult and complicated when you've got such pushback from the investigative agents involved in this case. We need a hero in this case. We need a hero in this case.
And I think that's going to be Joshua Levy. And I don't know how his boxing game or his MMA game is, but I'll tell you what,
bring him on.
His prosecution game is number one.
His game is strong.
Yeah. And we love you, Josh Levy. Thank you for doing what you're doing. Thank you, that FBI guy that spoke after him, who even has better hair than me. I guess everybody does. And we can't get out of here without a couple of laughs. Love you, Seth Gold. We'll never forget you. This episode is dedicated to you and Sandra Birchmore. And Susanne, thank you so much for your time, for your research, for your advocacy, and your investigative skill ability, which is a combination of course, skills and ability.
I like the word. I like adding words. Thank you so much, DJ. And thank you, everyone, for being here and continuing awareness for justice for Sandra Birchmore. Thank you so much.
Yep. Thank you, everybody in the chat. Mizzy and the Hizzy, Bob Marley, Irie Man. I guess you're from Ireland. Dylan. Let's see. Jessica. Barbara. How you doing, Barbara? I want to talk like Barbara, like from New York. So, and everybody else who was here. Well hung jury. I love that one. And thank you for supporting. And we will see you again. We'll be doing more Sandra Birchmore content on here, along with her co-victims, Enrique, Karen Reed, and of course the dearly departed of a couple of years ago, John O'Keefe. So for my homegirl, Miss Susanne Cleveland. This is DJ saying, first of all, which outro video should I do? The old cab one where they drive through the tunnel, or the new cab one? Which one you like better, Susanne?
Out with the old, in with the new.
Oh, look at that. Well, wait a minute. Like my hair. My hairs went out with the old. All right, for Susanne Cleveland. I look like Brian Albert. This is DJ.
Never.
Saying, peace out. One love. We'll see you down the road, and we're always wondering what's up around the bend.